Hello everyone, Minglavar and welcome. So my name is Beck Pitt and it's great to see so many of you here today. We are delighted to have Anna Page with us. Anna is a senior producer and she is the person, if you have a question about Open Learn Create, Anna is your person. So we're really pleased to have her with us today. And Anna's going to be talking about building effective quizzes on Open Learn Create. And I know we spent some time in the previous residential school looking at quizzes. We're going to spend some more time working on quizzes at the next residential school. So, but in the meantime, we've got this fabulous webinar and opportunity to hear from Anna and learn from her experiences of assessment and quizzes on the platform. So welcome, Anna. I'm gonna leave you with Anna now. Lovely to see you all, and thank you, Anna.
Hello, everybody. It's good to meet you from so far away. I'm going to talk to you today about building quizzes on Open Learn Create. And the first thing I'm going to do is talk to you about the fact that obviously some of you are using the platform already, and you've realized that there's various tools on the platform for layout and setup and for learning activities and for online assessment. But today we are going to be we're going to be concentrating on quizzes. So the aim of this session is to provide guidance about the purpose of online quizzes for learning, how to write good quiz questions which test understanding rather than memory, and how to configure some of the question types available in Moodle Quiz. Obviously, there are a lot of question types, and we're not going to be able to cover every single one of them. But I'm going to point you in the direction of places where you can get additional help for how to do that. Online assessment is something that we've been learning more about, etc., as we've gone along. And on Open Learn Create, we have found various ways of doing it, and especially on Open Learn, which is the OU's platform for free learning. You need to decide right at the start when you're first designing your course if the course is going to need assessment of some kind. Does it need non-graded informal assessment activities throughout the course? Do you plan to have graded assessment during or at the end of the course? Do you plan to provide some kind of evidence for learning based on the assessment, such as a digital badge or a statement of participation? Or will the learner have to complete a formal examination at an exam centre? These are all things you need to think about. You could use polls, quizzes, reflective exercises, and self-assessment questions for learners to check their learning. This session will concentrate on the quizzes. You could include practice quizzes, which have no pass grade. They're the formative assessment in your course. You can have graded quizzes, in other words, with a pass grade, and they are the summative assessment. The quizzes in online courses can have automated feedback for learners. In other words, you don't have to be the one who's actually testing them and doing the checking and marking the quiz. You can get the quiz to do that for you. This is useful if there's no tutor or teacher available to mark the quiz. So automating it as much as possible does mean that you need to build everything in from the start. So practice quizzes. Formative practice quizzes can help learners test how much they have absorbed during a course topic, providing stepped feedback for multiple attempts at a question. There's an example here on screen. I hope you can read it. But it's learners are asked to complete a quiz checking whether they've understood a concept which has been explained in the text. And the quiz consists of some multiple choice and some drag and drop questions. The questions give the learner feedback after each attempt, which builds upon the previous information provided, and after third attempt directs the learner back to specific course material to review it before they attempt the quiz again 24 hours later. And none of the questions are graded or carry any penalty, and the completion criteria is set to record that the learner attempted and submitted the quiz. And this is something that we do in the Open Learn badged open courses. we have practice quizzes in those, and this is how they are configured. Graded quizzes are the summative quizzes. They capture learner responses to questions which count towards the course completion criteria. They can also provide feedback to learners. And the example here is learners are asked to complete the end of course quiz. The quiz consists of multiple choice, drag and drop, yes, no questions, matching and numerical questions. So it has a mix of different question types. The questions give the learners feedback after each attempt, and after the third attempt, they direct the learner back to the specific course material to review before they attempt the question again 24 hours later. All the questions are graded, and some carry a percentage deduction penalty for second and third attempts. There's a question here in the chat about summative and formative, but I'm not quite sure what you're asking. So, you can do these things with the summative and the formative questions. It's just that this is what we tend to do in Open Learn courses. The completion criteria is set to record the grade which the learner achieves in the quiz. If the learner fails to achieve the pass grade, they may reattempt the quiz 24 hours later. And in Open Learn, we've got all our badged open courses which have quizzes with grades at the end. They actually are set to have as many attempts as a person needs. So they can actually attempt the quiz 24 hours later and 24 hours later and the next day and the next day until they eventually pass it. But in the meantime, they would go back and check the course material again. Now, reflective learning, you can use quizzes and reflective learning in combination, which can prompt deep thinking about a situation. This often means providing a scenario or a case study with a series of questions. So the example I've got here is instructions to the learner are to read the following case study about how a person coped with the effects of their illness. Write down your thoughts on the situation in your reflective log, which is a separate document, or it could be a blog, based on the principles discussed in this section, and answer the quiz questions in light of your conclusions. And then the case study text is provided and a series of quiz questions. And the responses are graded based on the criteria in the quiz settings. Now that could be formative or summative. It doesn't matter. You could use reflective learning and quizzes together. How to measure graded. You usually set a pass grade of some kind. You have to decide what that's going to be. So it could be 80% or 70% or whatever. But you would decide what the pass grade is going to be. Okay. Now, there's various different question behaviors. Then they are set at quiz level. They're not set at question level. In Moodle Quiz, the four main behaviors are deferred feedback, where a learner answers all the questions before any feedback is provided. This kind of question behavior often encourages learners to concentrate on their overall mark rather than on any specific feedback questions which you might provide. Then there's immediate feedback, which provides instant feedback with no hints or multiple tries. So they only get one attempt at the question. Then there's interactive with multiple tries, which provides instant feedback, hints, and multiple tries. And then we have manually graded, for essay type questions especially, though these can be used in other question types as well. On Open Learn, we don't have any tutors. It's impossible to manually grade. So we actually use interactive with multiple tries always for all of our Open Learn quizzes. Question types in Moodle Quiz. There's a lot of them, as you can see from this list. I don't know if any of you have actually gone and had a look at Moodle Quiz before this session or have attempted to build quizzes, but there are quite a few quiz question types there. Designing a good online quiz is harder than you might think. It takes quite a lot of thinking to get it right. Moodle quiz is very sophisticated, and there are plenty of question types. Some of these are specifically for mathematical questions, while others can be used for any subject area. The essay type question is only suitable for a quiz which will have a human marker. It cannot be marked by the computer. It is very good practice to have a few different question types in a quiz. Otherwise, they become very predictable and boring. And the worst kind of quiz is a series of true-false questions. They're just awful. And if we do get true-false questions, in a large batch, we tend to redesign them and rebuild them so that they're more interesting. We often combine them into a series of true-falses in one question type rather than lots. So the next slide is a question writing activity which you can do in any time after this session. I'm not going to ask you to do it during the webinar. I strongly suggest that before you attempt to set up a quiz in Moodle, you write your quiz questions and test them with colleagues. These 4 steps are a good process to follow when writing quiz questions. So step 1 is draw up different ways to ask a quiz question using the interactive with multiple tries feedback option. And then step 2, look at different question types and select 2 ways you could ask each question. This could take a little bit of time to do, of course. Write the questions in the question type formats you have chosen, as well as hint text for multiple tries and some feedback text. And then test your question versions by inviting a couple of colleagues to review and give feedback on which version of the question is more effective for demonstrating learner understanding. It's a really useful thing to do. It will probably take quite a bit of time to do this, but it can also be hugely rewarding and makes you really think about, so how are we going to assess the particular things that we want our students to learn? There is lots of good guidance. There are various resources on Open Learn Create which will help guide you when designing effective quizzes. How to make an open online course. It's got a section called How to Build a Quiz for Open Online Assessment. It has, and this covers the various different question types. I don't know if the screen's very clear, but it does list some of them there, and it will explain a little bit about some of them. It's quite a useful thing to attend to. The course builder guide. If you want the learner to see different set of questions every time they attempt a quiz, because if you're giving them more than one opportunity to attempt the quiz, you will need random variant questions in your quiz, which means you need to write more questions than will appear to the learner. The Quiz Builder Guide on Open Learn Create has a section about writing random variant questions. And I have sort of done a screen clip on the screen here to show you something of that, but you would need to go to the guide to have a closer look at it. Hands-on Moodle quiz has a lot of information about configuring quizzes and how the gradebook works. This whole hands-on Moodle quiz and the next resource I'm going to mention were put together by colleagues at the OU, Tim Hunt and Phil Butcher, who are the Moodle quiz gurus. They know an awful lot more about Moodle quizzes than I do. So these 2 guides are actually really helpful. The e-assessment with Moodle, which is the other one they created, it has a video introducing Moodle quiz, which is worth watching, and some very useful worked examples of different question types. So it's well worth attending to that one as well. Now, the quiz question creation process and checklist, I've adapted this from How to Make an Open Online Course, the section called Quiz Creation Process and Checklist. And it basically lays out the things you need to think about when you are creating a quiz. Identify the topics you want to cover, and for each topic, draw up possible ways to ask the question, referring to examples of the different question types in use. So this is a bit more detail than the previous stepped version I showed you. Decide on the feedback type for the quiz. And please note, a quiz can only have one feedback type for all the questions, e.g. interactive with multiple tries or deferred feedback. Draft questions for each topic in the quiz in the question formats you have chosen and write the hint text and the feedback text for them. Compile all the questions into quizzes and organize them into a logical order, grouping the random variant versions together under one question number. For example, 3A, 3B, 3C, each being a variant for question C. For question 3. Ask your colleagues to review the questions and feedback the text, and request that they provide comments on the pedagogical strength of the questions. Tell them about the potential audience for the open online course and the assessment strategy, including if the quiz is meant to be summative or formative. And then review and, if necessary, revise the questions, the feedback text, and the assessment strategy in light of comments from colleagues. That's a really important step, and it will help to strengthen your quiz questions. So once you have a series of questions for your quiz, you can start building in your online course. And Moodle Quiz enables a teacher to create quizzes comprising questions of various types, which I've already mentioned, including multiple choice and matching and short answer and numerical questions. And the teacher can allow the quiz to be attempted multiple times, and they can be shuffled or randomly selected from a question bank. And attempts can be marked automatically, with the exception of essay questions, as I mentioned before, and the grade is recorded in the grade book. And then you can also have hints and feedback, and when the correct answers are shown to students. So this is how to build the actual quiz itself. Create the quiz by clicking on Add Activity and selecting Quiz from the list. Fill in the Adding a New Quiz form. You will be able to update this anytime while configuring the quiz. It's under Edit Quiz Settings. So although you have to put in initial information now when you first set up the quiz, you can go back to it and update it. Use Hands-on Moodle Quiz and the help text, which is the question mark in a circle, to help with configuration as you go along. That's a really important thing, to make use of the help text whenever you can. Adding a new quiz, the form has various sections to configure. If you don't know all the settings you want when you first set up the quiz, you can return to them later. For this quiz, I've chosen interactive with multiple tries question behavior. It's not very clear on the screen there, but the arrow is pointing towards the question behavior selection box. The grade is one of the sections in the form. Keep grade to pass empty for a practice quiz. You don't need to put anything in there. You don't even have to put in a 0. For a graded course, insert the pass grade in the grade to pass field. However, this can be done later when all the quiz questions are set up and you know what the total grade will be. In fact, it's almost nonsensical to try putting it in before you have any quiz questions, because it won't let you. The extra restrictions on attempts to enforce a delay between quiz attempts for a time to revisit the course content before another attempt. Use this enforced delay in the extra restrictions on attempts. And the time includes options for minutes, hours, days, and weeks. As you can see, I've actually put an enforced delay there of 1 day, or it could be 24 hours, obviously, which is the same thing. That's what we use for the end of course quizzes in the badged open courses on OpenLearn on OpenLearn. The priority of the grade isn't important at the beginning when you're first setting up the quiz, but it is important if you want it to be a graded quiz. The overall feedback is text that is shown after a quiz has been attempted. By specifying additional grade boundaries, the text shown can depend on the grade obtained. If there is a pass grade, place the feedback for those who didn't achieve the grade in the feedback box for that grade boundary. So if the pass grade is 60%, the feedback would actually say, sorry, you haven't passed, or words to that effect. And then save and display the draft quiz. And the next step is to add questions to the quiz. So this is where you will be adding the questions. Add the quiz questions to your empty quiz via the Edit Quiz button and the Add function. You will have a choice of a new question from Question Bank or random question. For this example, because I want to have random variant questions in the quiz which are not already in the question bank, I have chosen a random question and then clicked on OU multiple response question type, although I could click on any at this stage, it doesn't matter, and then clicked on the Add button. Because the important thing I'm going to do next is actually create the question shell for putting all the random variants in. If you choose a random question, you will be prompted to create a new category for the question if you're not using an existing question from the question bank. The new category will be where you put all the random variants for that question. When you have given the category a name, click on Create Category and add Random Question. The security of the question bank, it can't be accessed by anyone who doesn't have the permissions to be able to access it. So only those who are teachers or who have course manager permissions or have owner permissions for the course will be able to get to them. All the learners who enroll on your course will only have open learner permissions. They will only have that role, and they will not be able to see the question bank. They won't be able to get to it at all. Okay. The new category called Question 1 is set up ready to add questions and will now appear in the quiz. Add a question by clicking on See Questions and create a new question. So See Questions is alongside random question number 1, and then click on the little box which will, prompt you to add a new question because there aren't any questions in that one so far. In this example, I'm choosing to create a multiple response question to add to the new Question 1 category in the question bank. This will be the first variant of the question. And each variant of the question needs to have its own name. For example, variant 1A, variant 1B, variant 1C, or question 1A, question 1B, question 1C. Usually I just abbreviate it by doing Q1A, Q1B, etc. But it's up to you what you decide to call all your different variants. And insert the question text into the box and decide what the mark for the question will be. The default mark will be 1. As you can see, I've changed that to 3 for this particular question. General feedback is shown to the student after they have completed the question. Unlike specific feedback, which depends on the question type and what response the student gave, the same general feedback text is shown to all students. You can use the general feedback to give students a fully worked answer and perhaps a link to more information they can use if they did not understand the question. I usually shuffle the question choices of answers so they don't always appear in the same order. That's for the multiple choice type questions. And I generally don't number them, but the choice is there to number them if you wish. So you can see just below the general feedback box are those 2 options. Insert an answer in each choice box and use the correct checkbox to indicate if the answer is correct or not. A multiple response question can have several correct and several incorrect answers. There is also a space for feedback for each choice. This can be left blank if you don't want to provide feedback. A general feedback message, depending on whether the learner has answered a question correctly or not, can be edited in combined feedback. As you can see, it actually puts in default text of, for any response, your answer is correct. For any partially correct response, your answer is partially correct, etc. I'm sorry if you can't hear me. I think everyone else can. I hope you can. And there was a question about step 9. If you can write a little bit more in the chat box, that would be really helpful. I'm going to move on a little bit. When questions are run using the interactive with multiple tries or adaptive mode behavior, so that the student will have several tries to get the question right, there are penalty option controls on how much they penalized for each incorrect try. The penalty is a proportion of the total question grade. So if the question is worth 3 marks and the penalty is a third of that, then the student will score 3 if they get the question right first time, 2 if they get it right second try, and 1 if they get it right in the third try. If you want to allow learners to have more than 1 try for a question before they move on to the next question, you can provide hint text which helps them answer the question. This is where you can encourage some deeper thinking about the question and prompt learners to revisit some of the course content. So you can actually put that kind of information in those boxes if you want to. You don't have to, but it's there, the option is there. Once you save the question, it will appear in the question bank in that category. You can then add further variants of the question to the category. So you can see the screen clip on the left where there's a bit of a green highlight. That was when there was just the 1 question in the question bank for that category. And then the screen clip on the right is showing that there are 3 variants of the same question. In the example shown, the 3 variants all had the same question, but the answer choices were a slightly different selection of right and wrong answers for each variant. There was quite a long list of right answers and a few wrong answers. So these was divided up to make 3 random variant versions of the same question. None of the questions had all the possible right and wrong answers. Use select missing words, which is a different question type, for a paragraph of text with some words missing. So each choice has a unique number with the correct choices placed in double brackets in the text for that drop-down box. So if you look in that example, you can see that it's got a paragraph with some double brackets in various places with numbers in them. And this is the next screen showing each drop-down box in the paragraph is a different group with several words in the drop-down for the learner to choose from. Missing words in the question text are filled in using drop-down menus. This is quite useful if you don't want people to type the words in. You can actually just get them to select from a drop-down box instead. This example of missing words is quite a complex one. It's a table with drop-down boxes for selecting the correct response. Drop-down boxes tend to be more accessible to learners than drag and drop questions, which doesn't work well on some mobile devices or for learners using screen readers. So you need to bear that in mind. Drag and drop is good, but it does also have its limitations. And that particular example, this next slide, shows that table with the missing words in the edit mode when you're actually editing the question. So it's showing the double brackets around the different answers. In the edit question form, the answer choices are grouped depending upon which column they are used for in the table. Each choice is numbered and the groups are numbered. So this is showing some of the options for that particular table. I haven't shown all of them because actually it would give away a lot of the right answers. And this is a quiz question that's actually used in one of those resources I've referred you to. But it's just showing you an illustration of how it looks in the edit mode. Now, pattern match is another type of question. It allows a short response of one or a few sentences that is graded by comparing against various model answers, which are described using the OU's pattern match syntax. Normally, we try to just do a one-word response or just a couple of words, because using pattern match for a whole paragraph is incredibly risky. It actually doesn't work that well. It's very sophisticated to set it up. Pattern match is quite complex to set up, and you have to know the syntax to use. There are some worked examples of pattern match in the e-assessment with Moodle course, which I mentioned earlier, and which we'll make sure we get the links to you afterwards. You can also set up a pattern match question using the combined question option. And that's actually quite good, because in that sort of question, you can have pattern match and various other options as well, which I will show you in the next slide. A combined question type allows the embedding of the response fields for various available sub-questions in the question text. Depending on which question types you have installed, the student can enter a numeric or a short text answer, or choose an answer or answers using a select box or check boxes. This is what appears when the combined question is first set up. The question text will include the 4 types of responses it can support. You can delete the ones you don't need when you input the question text and duplicate the types you do need. For example, if you're only using multi-response, then you'd have several of those and none of the others. You can find worked examples of how to configure various different questions using the combined question type in the e-assessment for Moodle course. And I recommend visiting that and having a look. And then drag and drop questions I mentioned earlier. And I said there are some accessibility issues with them, but they are widely used, and we do use them a lot in the Open Learn quizzes, for the badged open courses. So, there are ways around things, and you can always provide accessible versions of a question as well if you wanted to. But drag and drop questions can be set up in a number of ways. For missing words in a paragraph, which is what's illustrated here, missing letters in a crossword puzzle using a table grid. That's usually quite interesting to set up. Quite a challenge, but worth it because it looks good, and it generally does work quite well for people. It can be used to label a diagram. Images or text labels are dragged and dropped into drop zones in a background image. And that takes quite something to set up as well, and obviously isn't that accessible for anyone who's visually impaired. But it is one way of testing whether somebody has absorbed what they saw in their course text, and whether they can label up a diagram appropriately. So it is quite a good thing to do. In this example on the screen, there are more words than spaces to fill, because what's been done is we've provided plausible distractor words to make the question slightly harder. So rather than just providing only the words that are the missing words, you can provide additional words which might be, but aren't, the correct words to fit in those places. And it does make students think a little bit harder about, so what is actually being said here? And it also obviously makes them think about the words that have been used in the course. So if they need to refer back, they might spot where a word has been used a lot and they think, oh yeah, that was the right one. And actually it probably still isn't the right one because they haven't thought about it properly. And as before, there are a number of worked examples of how to configure different drag and drop questions in the e-assessment for Moodle course. It's well worth going and having a look at that course and going through it, because you will find a lot more information there than I've been able to tell you in this webinar. So to finish off before questions, these are all the resources I've been pointing to today in the webinar. The first one is how to make an open online course. That was written by the people who actually put together all the Open Learn courses. And so there was quite a group of us who wrote that in collaboration about 3 years ago. And becoming an open educator is another one which talks all about online learning. And that was written by the Opening Educational Practices in Scotland team, of which Beck and I were members. So we were involved in writing that course. And then there's the Course Builder Guide, which for Open Learn Create, which has been largely written by me and has still got plenty of gaps in it. There's still things that need to be filled in. So whenever I have the time, I add more to the guide. And then, of course, there's the 2 Moodle courses, which were written by Tim Hunt and by Phil Butcher. And that's e-assessment with Moodle and hands-on Moodle quiz. They're both very well worth going and having a look at. And that's the end of all my slides. So if anyone has got any questions for me, please do ask. Or if you want me to go back to any of the slides in particular to talk about them a bit more. I can see someone is typing. How to create the quiz. Okay, let me go back. How to create the quiz. That's right back at near the beginning. When you are in a course, you will have an interactive quiz in PDF. Oh, I don't know what you mean by that. When you go to create a quiz, you would, within your course, you would need to give it a new name, and you do it by adding a resource, or at least adding an activity. I don't have a screen clip of that with me, unfortunately, to show you where the button is, although maybe I do. Let's just hold on. Let's see if I've got that somewhere. No, I don't think I do. Okay, sorry about that. But yes, you would click on that button and select the quiz from it, and select the quiz option. So it's add an activity or resource, and then select the quiz option, and then start writing in the the name of the quiz and what its description is, etc. The interactive quizzes don't go into PDF. I mean, we don't have them available as a PDF. I don't think you can actually download the quiz as a PDF for somebody to use. There are obviously back-end views of the quiz for you as the person who's created it to be able to download all the questions if you needed them, but you would then probably need to recraft them. I don't think there is an option to actually just download it and use it offline, but I can investigate that. Does anyone have any other questions? And I hope I didn't speak too fast. Yes, using Acrobat for the PDF, presumably. Does anyone have any other questions? I know I haven't covered any of the maths type questions. I'm not very familiar with them. Is it create fillable forms in Google Docs? I don't know. A fillable form, I would think, is probably more of a questionnaire than a quiz. I don't think fillable forms have a marking criteria in them. Good luck with building quizzes. Is Moodle constructed by the university? Well, Moodle is obviously it's created by the organization who set up Moodle in the first place, but a lot of universities have had a big influence on Moodle, and the Open University has had a huge influence on Moodle Quiz especially. I mentioned Tim Hunt and Phil Butcher. They've been the main movers and shakers behind a lot of the functionality of the current Moodle quiz that everybody uses. A lot of the quiz question types they've created have actually been, set up by the OU. I'm just going to find the slide that's got the various different question types, because that, let's just see. Because I can point out a couple of the question types that have been influenced by the OU. A bit too far back. Oh yes, here's the slide. Okay. You'll see that there's a multiple choice one in there. We don't use that so much as we use the OU multiple response, which is a slightly more sophisticated version of the standard Moodle multiple choice question, and it's graded very slightly differently. I can't give you the exact details of what the grading differences are, but that's one that was actually designed by the OU developers. Then I think the pattern match questions have been very much influenced by the OU, because I mentioned that there was a pattern match syntax which they had brought in. And I would strongly suggest going and having a look at the e-assessment course and for information about the pattern match, how to set up pattern match questions. Because done well, they can be really, really powerful. You might see on that list there, it says Code Runner. That's not actually available, and it probably won't show up on your list of options when you are adding question types to your quiz, because it's only available for OU staff because of licensing issues, because Code Runner is a separate thing which has been sort of integrated into Moodle Quiz. So we can't allow other people to use that without having to amend the license. I'm also not sure if stack questions are available outside the OU for other people to configure, but I'm not quite sure. As you can see, there are several drag and drop types of questions. There's drag and drop onto text, drag and drop markers, drag and drop onto image. And those are really clever, but you can also do that kind of thing. I think in the combined one, I might be wrong. Then there's lots of mathematical type questions, which I haven't covered because I'm not very familiar with them. But there will be plenty of examples of those in the two courses by Phil Butcher and Tim Hunt. And then there's various various variable ones, variable numeric sets, etc. And also pattern matching of, reverse pattern match. I don't know what that does. You'd need to have a look at that and experiment. Obviously, I've said avoid the essay type question unless you are planning to mark your quizzes yourself. They just won't work. You set that up and the person will be completely flummoxed because the system won't know what to do and they won't get a grade for it. So it'll actually sort of bung up your whole quiz. So I would suggest going and having a look at those 2 courses to get more details about how to use these. And avoid using too many true-false questions in one quiz. You can have 1 or 2 questions for true-false in a quiz, but don't have too many of them because it makes it very boring and very predictable. Has anyone got any other questions? I can't see any more questions in the chat box. That's good. I'm glad you're clear about it. It is very interesting. As I've explored Moodle Quiz more and more in the last 5 years, I've got to know a lot, but I still don't know everything there is to know about it. And working out how to ask a question so as to prompt deep thinking is one of the great challenges, and it's also quite a fun thing to do. But it is time consuming. Don't underestimate the amount of time it will take to come up with some good questions that will really make the students think. And that's one of the great and interesting challenges about it. Has anyone got any more questions that they would like to ask? I'll go back to these showing the links to the courses, although if you go to Open Learn Create, you will find them via the Get Started section of the website. I haven't talked about today how to go about configuring completion tracking and badges for your quizzes, because the important thing first of all is to get the quizzes set up and right. And also an important thing to do is to test them before you actually make them available to learners. Usually that can involve setting up a separate account which only has learner access to the course, and trying the quizzes that way and seeing how they work, seeing if they're working as you expect them to. And then with your master account, which has more control, you can delete the various attempts that have been made when testing it, and then try again, reconfigure the quiz, etc. All of that is explained in the course builder guide. There is a process for doing it. And there is also a process in that guide on how to set up digital badges and do completion tracking and offer a statement of participation, etc. I haven't covered that today because we were mostly talking about the quiz questions, but obviously quizzes can lead to that kind of thing if you want to offer it. But it's all there in the course builder guide. Well, if nobody has got any more questions, thank you very much for your attention and for being kind enough to attend. And I hope you found it useful. And good luck with creating quizzes in Moodle. And enjoy doing it if that's possible. I'm sure it is. I'm sure this will trigger off some lively discussions and debates about how best to ask questions. And that's all a good thing. And if you've got any further questions to ask, please do contact the Open Learn Create mailbox if you get stuck with anything when you're trying to configure a quiz, and we'll do our best to help. Or otherwise, ask Beck to build up a group of questions and then get them back to me, and I'll be happy to advise. But thank you very much, and I'm going to say goodbye now, and I'm going to switch off the recording.